May 9th, I'm sorry. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the day you've given us, for your love, your mercy, and just for the blessings you give us. We just pray that you be with us all tonight as we conduct this business of the village. We pray that you grant us wisdom. We pray, Father, that you be with our residents. We just pray, Father, that your hand of mercy be upon them as well. We thank you for your love and your mercy in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, Council, thanks for being here. Mr. Gilpin, would you call the roll, please?
I'm sure who's first this month. Mr. Coogan?
Here.
Ms. Shepherd?
Here.
Ms. Hollifield?
Here.
Ms. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Noble?
Here.
Ms. Brown?
Here.
Mayor Osmond?
Here. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes. This is from our regular scheduled April meeting, April 11th. Trust you all have seen those. Any comments, corrections, amendments? No, I'd entertain a motion to accept them as read.
I move we accept the April the 11th, 2019 minutes as written.
Thank you,
I
Ms. Shepherd, and thank you, Mr. Coogan. Would you call the roll, please, Mr. Gilpin?
Okay. Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
Ms. Hollifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any communications tonight, Mr. Dodson?
There are not.
It doesn't look like we're going to have any public input at the current time. Nobody's here. That brings us to our administration and committee reports. I am up first. The Mayor's Court report for the month of April 2019 had a total revenue of $8,815.25 with $6,771.25 going to the village, $1,975 to the state, and $69 to the county. Back on April the 21st, I think it was, we had our clean and green, I know it wasn't 21st, it might have been the 17th or something like that. And it was a total bust for us. Travis and I got all dressed up and had hot dogs. Yeah. Hot dogs, and we were told that there was going to be 12 people showed up, and nobody showed up. And the problem with that is it's kind of run by the county, and people sign up on a website, and they'll say they're from Bethel, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to show up at Bethel.
We also have a group of Boy Scouts who go elsewhere.
And we think that's what happened. The group of Boy Scouts signed up and went and worked at, I think they worked at East Fork State Park, so, I mean, which is good. So right before we were getting ready to bug out, my sister showed up and forced me to go out and pick up garbage, so we did for 2 hours, and her and I picked up 14 bags of garbage and 4 tires and some other stuff out of the creek in the area there. Save a lot between there, so it was a lot of fun spending time with my sister, and I really appreciated her forcing me to do that. And I just wanted to thank my sister Angel James for doing that. And so that was a first for us, that nobody showed up, but yet we still was able to get a load of garbage picked up. So also I want to address this thing here tonight too. We got a letter here at the Village Building April 30th. It's a letter from an anonymous individual who lives, I guess, on Harris or around Harris Avenue. And they address several issues here about campers and boats being parked next to houses, which they can be parked next to houses. They're not supposed to be in front of the houses. About dogs running loose, which is bad. About quads being drove up and down the street, quad runners, which is bad. And barking dogs. And I would say to this anonymous person that you need to call the police. If something like that happens, you see something like that, you need to call the police, which is the exact same thing I do. If I see a dog running loose, I call the police, and the police will take care of it. They've done it several times for me. And especially if quads on the street, I'd say that's an illegal vehicle or use of the public street, right, Chief? Or Sarge? And I'll do that 100 times, I'm sure. And these people should call the police. Another thing is I wish that people would sign their names to this so that we can, send a letter back and address it. I mean, there's not going to be any retribution for pointing things like this out. We appreciate it. So just, that's what I'd had to say about it. And they mentioned here about tall grass. We've sent out a lot of tall grass letters. I'm sure you were going to address that at some time, Mr. Dotson. It's been very rainy. I work for the Park District. We've been struggling to get our grass mowed because of the rain. But we did send out a lot of letters, and I think a lot of grass has been mowed, and people are trying to clean it up. And so, yeah, I like the fact that they're sending letters and addressing issues, but I would just like to know who it is so that we could respond to it. So, also tonight, we're going to be having legislation, and it's titled The Alternative Method of Apportionment, and it's kind of like, not kind of, but this is a plan that was created by the city of Milford, and it's just an alternative plan to what, for lack of a better term, the township's plan was. And in this plan, we'll receive more money than what we would have in the township's local government fund plan. So we're asking you to adopt that this evening. Was you going to address that, Mr. Goldman, when your time came up? I mean, we would get, I think we said another $3,000 through the Milford plan, or I think it was maybe more than that.
Should be more than that. It's in the Exhibit A attachment has a variance column that shows how much theirs is different than the...
And with the Milford plan, that's what I'm calling the Milford plan, the alternative plan, even several townships would stand to get more than what the township's plan was. So I was hoping we could get that adopted this evening. I was going to encourage the Columbia County Mayor's Association to adopt and send out a letter to the commissioners and to maybe Bonnie Batchelor, who's the township, what is she, the chair, Bill?
She's president of the association.
President of the association. So just, that's going to be coming up in legislation, and I just wanted to make you aware of it. And I think that's all I have for now. Next up is Mr. Dotson, our village administrator.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on that legislation, one of the differences between the so-called Milford plan and the township plans, the township plan was a good start, I think. I mean, I think that, as the village of Bethel, we can say that we were getting more than we should have been all along for whatever reason. So the problem with the township plan is it funnels 44% of the money up to the top 3 townships in the county. 50% of the money goes to the top 4, which, they already have. They have the easiest road to hoe as far as getting money from property tax levies because they can bring in so much per mill. So I think that, the Milford plan addresses that. It makes it a little more equitable. Certainly, we still lose more than half of ours, but at least some of our money is going to the smaller townships and some of that to, our township, Tate Township. So it's something that I hope the villages will come together on and maybe get some of the smaller townships to support as well. Also, we have issued 15 grass notices so far. It has kind of been an early start to the mowing season, but it has been wet. We have mowed 5 of those lots subsequently that did not get mowed by the property owners after we sent the letters. I think we still have a couple more to get, but there's water standing in those yards, so we will keep at that. We've also issued 3 notices for inoperable vehicles, and we're working on that. Let's see. Tonight, I would request a motion. As you know, last year we did the stormwater renovation at the corner of Bone and Union Street. We put in 4 new parking spots on Bone Street. We have now removed the parking in front of the apartment building, the 4 parking spots closest to the corner. That's kind of a bottleneck. That was essentially a one-way street because there was parking on both sides, and that was why we put the 4 parking spots on Bone. So
It's very difficult to see out.
yeah, so we've removed those parking spots. We've striped that. We just need council to make a motion establishing that as no parking, so that if there are violations, the officers can issue tickets.
So how would that be?
It's just a form of a motion.
So this is on North Union,
This is on the
corner of North Union and Bone.
the southeast corner of Bone and Union. 4 parking spots.
I make a motion that we
Designate.
designate the southeast corner of
Darn Union.
North Union as no parking zone.
I second.
All right. Did you get that, Bill? Ms.
I
Shepherd
did.
and Ms. Holliday. Any discussion about that?
Is that going to impact the residents there at all? Do they have enough parking?
Yeah, we added 4 units and now we're taking away these 4, so
Okay.
it should not impact.
They actually have a parking lot.
There's a parking
There's a parking lot.
In between, behind both of those buildings,
We also
but
have public parking right here.
Right. So,
And it is used.
It is used.
yes, I've received more than one complaint from people that as they're going west on Bone Street, when they get to that stop
Difficult.
sign, there's no visibility.
So we have striped it?
is it that
Yes, it
building?
is striped.
Right over there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and there weren't cars parked over that, you know.
Is there gonna be
I've checked a couple of times, so I don't think there'll be an issue, but there'll be a warning period, I'm sure.
Oh, okay. I didn't know, are you gonna put some signs in too, or?
Yeah, we have signs ordered.
Okay.
Unrelated to that building owner, so I will be not participating.
It needs to be done. There's no visibility when
Right,
you're
but
going west.
just
It's
so
not
that
as
there's
bad from the opposite
transparency.
direction.
I agree. Any other discussion? Mr. Gup, would you call a roll on that?
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
Ms. Holifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Abstain.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, the town hall, I think everything is ready for the town hall next Tuesday at 7 PM at the Grant Career Center. There will be 2 functions going on that evening. Ours will be in the cafeteria. There's another function being held in the auditorium. So they've asked that the town hall parking be directed to the rear of the building, so I'll check with Chief Teague and ask that he get the sign trailer over to direct the town hall attendees to the back lot, and they'll enter through the back door that takes you straight to the cafeteria.
And that is what it,
At Grant?
The 14th
Yes.
At 7 o'clock?
Tuesday at 7 o'clock, yes, and that is, I believe we have secured representation from the,
Yes, you jogged my memory there. I met with Tim Holland and Linda Brooks from Claremont Metropolitan Housing Monday after work. I went and talked to them for about an hour. They plan on being there. They're not the development group on this. They're simply the people who would be doing placement of residents at the complex itself, if it ever were to happen. The development group felt it was a little premature because they have not received the funding for this thing even yet, so they didn't even want to participate in it. They're gonna, maybe if they get the funding, have some participation at a smaller, more intimate settings with direct neighbors in the near future, and they're sending out invitations to that, I think. But, so we're gonna have, representatives from Claremont Metropolitan Housing there, and, they're good people. I've known them a very long time, and I hope that people will treat them with respect. They better. And they're very honest people, so they plan on being there. So, anything else?
that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Next up's our fiscal officer, Mr. Gilpin.
Just have 2 quick things. We have ordinance 1915 to amend appropriations. I'd mentioned to finance last week that we may need to amend them a little bit for 2 reasons. Primary reason is the additional $2,500 that was received from the Burke Trust for the PTO group. If you were to compare this one against the last one, however, you'd actually see the line has been lowered because I discovered this afternoon that I accidentally put the $15,000 for the scholarships in the scholarship fund and the regular Burke Trust fund. So I'm backing out, the difference. So that number is actually $12,500 lower. And then I had reported to finance earlier this year that some of the lines for health insurance they weren't enough in the temporary appropriations to get us through the whole year. So I did the math on that and tweaked those by small amounts that'll allow us to get through the year on that. And in most of the fund, I know in the water fund, for example, I was able to find savings on other lines. It was just a matter of moving it from one line to another. The total didn't change. But since it's considered an employee benefit, I don't have the authority to move that on my own. That takes council action. So that's the 2 reasons for amended appropriations. And then I also wanted to ask, I'm assuming we do this by motion also, I'd like to go ahead and set the 2020 tax budget. And historically, we do it on the day of the July council meeting, just prior to the meeting opening. I need to run a public notice for that, so I'd like to go ahead and set that if we could. It would be for July 11th at 5:30 PM.
All right.
So,
Council, we need a motion to have our regular annual tax hearing.
I'll make a motion that we do the annual tax hearing on July 11th at 5:30 PM.
Should we
All right.
do it at 5:30 or?
We usually say 5:25.
because usually there's nobody here, so it's just a matter of record. You open it, close it,
Okay.
do your council meeting.
Okay.
We usually do it at the council time, and if the council starts a couple minutes late, then
All right, thanks, Ms. Brown. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Any other questions? Call roll, please, Mr. Gilpin.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes?
Ms. Hallfield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Okay. Next up is our solicitor, Ms. Superman.
A couple of items. First, the administrator advised that the safety committee has decided that it would like to proceed with permitting golf carts and under-speed vehicles on village roads. I'm in the process of preparing legislation on that, and I intend to have that to you by the next safety committee meeting. Do you know when that's going to be?
Yes, no, 6/11 to 5:30. June 11th
June
to
11th to 5:30. Is that right before council?
It
Is the same date?
is not.
Oh, okay. So I will have that for that meeting, and then if the council is, or the committee is satisfied, we'll put it on the agenda for June. The next item is, I have also been working with Travis and the Mayor's Court Prosecutor Keith Foreman with respect to the property at 337 Southeast Street. There was a notice of violation issued on that property. The property owner refused to allow contractor onto the property to get an estimate of the cost to abate the nuisance on that property. And as a result, we issued a citation to Mayor's Court to the property owner in order to get a court order that will ensure our ability to get on the property and have a contractor do the cleanup without having interference from the property owner. The property owner has removed that case to municipal court, so we'll be dealing with that at the municipal court level. And then the last item I had is Travis indicated that there were at least a couple council members, I think, who wanted to discuss the possibility of establishing a CIC. So I can discuss that now, or I can discuss that later in the meeting, whichever anyone prefers.
Can you tell us what a CIC is?
Yeah.
It obviously wasn't me.
So a CIC is short for a Community Improvement Corporation, and it is a corporate entity that is established by statute in the Ohio Revised Code, and it is a kind of pseudo-public agency, and it acts as an arm for a municipality. It consists of, it has to have on its board, a majority of the board has to be elected officials of the village. And what it's used for is economic development efforts, and actually the statute indicates that it is to promote industrial, commercial, economic and civic development in the village. And CICs can do some things that villages can't. For example, as you know, if you want to sell a piece of property, you have to put it in the paper and you have to sell it to the highest and best bidder on that property. CICs don't have those same restrictions. So if the village had a piece of property that it wanted to sell and it had a particular end user in mind, that, you know, someone expressed interest in a piece of property that was owned by the village thought that was going to be a good beneficial use to that property, the village could transfer that property to the CIC, and then the CIC would have a contract with the purchaser with all the terms involved, and it can do that without having to go through some of the other hoops that the village would have to do, and has a little bit more leeway on doing those things. But it does act somewhat as a public body. Its meetings are open to the public. Its records are subject to public records requirements. So it's still very transparent, but it's more of a kind of business development arm for the village. And the way that we establish one is we establish them the same way we would establish a corporation. We would file articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State. We would establish bylaws to run the organization. We would appoint the board and the members, and they would run as a body. There are some additional requirements, filing requirements once you do it. The first is that I would recommend that, that you have the organization get 501c3 status, so we would have to file that paperwork with the IRS and get that approved. Additionally, annually, I believe CICs have to file a Hinkle report.
They do.
There is some IRS filing requirements.
990.
Yeah, 990. And the Attorney General's office requires CICs to register through their charitable organization and file an annual report there as well. So there is some administrative requirements that you would have to tack on, but other than that, the process is relatively easy. Some CICs are very active. For example, in one of my communities, the CIC owns property, rents property to businesses and residents, and that entity meets on a regular basis and does kind of big scale development. Other communities that the CIC is largely dormant until a particular need arises. So it can kind of be as small or as big as your needs are in that respect.
So those are the pluses. What are the negatives with creating this?
It's just kind of the additional administrative steps you have to go through. I mean, you're basically operating another corporation.
So you have extra work for Bill and extra work for Travis, likely, with creation of this.
It's not a lot.
Okay.
It's not a lot. But it's just a tool that you can have.
You said that if you tagged on the 503C.
501c3.
501c, would that help us in a way if we couldn't find one to do the concerts in the park? Could we use
Yeah,
that?
the CIC could do it.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not saying,
Now the CIC, the one thing to keep in mind is CIC activities are also going to have to fall under our insurance and all that kind of stuff. So you don't really avoid that kind of removing the liability issue
Right.
from the village by using the CIC. But but the village can get the liquor permits too. It's
Through
not-
the CIC?
I mean, the village can do it on its own. It doesn't need a CIC to do that. It doesn't need a 501c3 to do that. It is eligible just as the entity that it is to
so,
do those type
Our
of things.
liability insurance carrier does not
Yes,
want us to do that.
correct.
would that allow, not to say this would ever happen, but like, say we bought the Midway with the CIC, we could get that up and running using the CIC. If, like, not to say that would happen, it's not up for
Like we
sale.
would own, like say we bought the theater, we could rent it out to someone to operate, but we would still be the owners of it.
Yes.
And the care,
You could
probably.
do that. You could be a landlord, you could be a seller, you could be a developer. I mean, the CIC has a lot of flexibility in how it.
Yeah, like the properties across from the middle school, as they go for sale, the CIC can purchase those, remove the homes and prepare them for commercial use.
But it's just easier to do it through a CIC than through the village.
Yes.
But we would still have to use general fund money.
So you would fund the CIC through your appropriations.
Okay.
Now, some CICs reach a point where the CIC is earning its
Self-sustaining.
right. And typically what we do is once we establish the CIC, we create an agency agreement between the village and the CIC that kind of sets out the terms. And for example, if the village were to decide that it wants to acquire a piece of property, and the village gives the money to the CIC to make the purchase. The CIC then has to return, and then the CIC sells it. And the CIC would return the money to the village, but the CIC can also retain like an administrative fee for processing the transaction, usually like around 10%. So that's kind of how CICs, that's one way that CICs start to generate and become self-sufficient.
Rent would be another.
And rent is another
And you
thing.
said this is made up of elected officials.
So it has to be a majority of elected officials, but the remaining people can be residents,
And how many people might be on a CIC?
typically 7. So you would have, it's typically on a CIC, it's typically the mayor, 3 council members, and then 3 residents. Some CICs allow one of the members to not be a resident, maybe it's someone who
A
just.
local business person.
Right, or has other ties to the village or particular skills, and they would want to volunteer to be on the board.
And this is created by ordinance?
So the CIC is created, it's not actually created by ordinance. You would just instruct me to establish one, and I would go and file the paperwork,
Who would instruct you to do that?
council.
And on the liability insurance, is there a way to find out what our insurance, like the cost, the additional cost to it, if there would be any, before we established it?
I mean, for doing the concerts in the park,
Well, any of that, like if we took on a business.
I don't think I don't think there would be any additional liability.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, typically, most of my communities that have CICs, their insurance covers all their property and all their liability for both the CIC and the village. And it's all, and I don't know that it really increases
okay.
the cost or affects it.
And another option, if the village only had, one parcel or one area that they wanted to develop, you can also use the county CIC, is that correct?
Yes, but I have not had experience with doing that, but I have heard that it can be a little difficult.
Yeah.
So if we did the CIC, like the property that's burnt, but the fire department has not condemned, we could purchase that, flip it, rent it, and start generating income for the CIC.
Can you
Or
use it
just
for a
sell
blighted
it.
property?
Or just sell it?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
You could use it to acquire that, but the village could acquire it too. I mean, you don't need the CIC to do
Right.
that. I mean, the part where we can go, the village can go and acquire properties, all, to Travis's point. And frankly, the village should be the entity that holds properties while those things are happening, because the village has tax exempt, status on those properties, whereas a CIC does not.
Okay.
So once it's being held by the CIC is gonna pay property taxes on those properties.
okay.
But we could purchase blighted properties if the seller, if the owner is willing to sell.
Sure.
Because we've had a couple of them here in the village that,
Sure.
well, 3 or 4
Now,
in the
keep
last
in
few
mind,
years that have
I think
been
at
worked
least
on.
on one of those, I think the burned house, Travis sent me the tax report on it, and it looks like it's got delinquent taxes, so it's eventually gonna go into tax foreclosure. And when it goes through that process, there's the ability of the village to get that property for free or for at court cost, I believe,
It has to go through sheriff's auction.
before it goes to sheriff's
Yeah,
sale.
before.
It's once the foreclosure is through, but before it goes to sheriff's auction, the county prosecutor is supposed to offer it to the village.
Which I would be interested in. How long does that take for that typically to happen?
I think delinquent, taxes have to be delinquent for 24 or 36 months.
I know
I did email the county and ask, but I haven't received a response
I
yet to
asked-
find out though.
that once, and it was like a year and a half.
So,
It depends. So the statute changed last year, and counties that have a port can do an accelerated delinquent tax sale. I'm not aware that Claremont.
I thought we do now.
Do you?
Port Authority?
Yeah, Claremont does.
Oh, okay, so they could accelerate the
So
delinquent.
maybe we need to reach out, maybe I can reach out to the Port Authority and find out.
does council want to have any more discussion about a CIC?
One more thing. Since it's the 5013C, would that open doors for us like it did for the Historic Society for grants?
Sure.
But we're already a
We're
nonprofit.
already a nonprofit.
Right, but I'm just
so-
saying that, I mean, does that kind of make it different though? I mean,
The only place I really see the difference is that it's more recognized as being an entity that can receive tax-free donations, because the village in and of itself, under the IRS rules, can receive a donation and that donation is tax deductible. But not very many people are familiar with that. They don't really understand because it doesn't have like the lingo with it. But once you have a CIC, it is a 501c3. People can make donations. For example, one of my communities is establishing a park. The CIC is doing the park. The CIC has done all the fundraising and has received, a lot of, probably $80,000 in donations from businesses and individuals in the community to support the park. I think the fact that it's a 501c3 helps in that fundraising effort, whereas if it had just been the village saying, we want to build a park, give us money, it probably wouldn't have done as well.
That's interesting.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion tonight?
Well, does council want to discuss anymore, or do you want to move ahead on it? I mean, it can be discussed in committees
I
as
think we
well.
need to discuss maybe in finance if we have money to put into this.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend, that you kind of think about some of these things and let me know if you have any additional questions. And then if you decide it's something you want to do, we can start doing the paperwork.
Let's digest that for a little bit.
Because we don't want to file something and then decide we don't want to do it, because then we have to go and dissolve it. More work.
Good discussion, thank you. Is that it, Ms. Supan?
That's all I had. Thank you.
All right, Chief Teague is at training this week, so we have Sergeant Plank filling in.
All right. For the month of, April, right? We had 176 calls, 36 offense reports, 11 incident reports, 7 crashes, 69 traffic arrests, 53 traffic warnings. We had 1 operating a vehicle intoxicated. We had 1 out-of-county warrant. There was 4 papers were served. We had 59 special details. We assisted other departments 55 times. And 7 adult arrests, 3 juvenile arrests, 2 vacant property checks. We had 109 business checks, and 326 student contacts, 116 staff contacts, and 13 parent contacts. 3 presentations or meetings. We did 298 supplements, and worked 32 reports, with 5 of those closed by arrest, and 29 closed, just closed them out. And then I also have from last month's meeting, the golf cart ordinances from Williamsburg and Richmond. I'll give Ms. Suppinger those so that she can peruse those. May 17th is a reality fair at the middle school. I'll be there that day. I'm going to issue some fake citations for speed, crashes, whatever, so that they have to go and figure out how they're going to pay for that out of the money that they've been given, and kind of conduct life as we would. May the 22nd is Senior Tractor Day. We're going to have a big parade like we normally do. We'll keep that on the south side of town and out here on 125 to the high school. And then May 23rd is graduation at Northern Kentucky University. I'll be in attendance of that because I'm the president of the Alumni Association, and I will be announcing who those awards went to. We had 14 great candidates. I think there was 3 guys and 11 girls, and all 14 of them were spectacular. And then the career day at the primary school on the 13th was a success. Myself and Lisa were there. Very good day, and that's all I have to report.
How many scholarships does the Alumni Association give out?
Well, that's a thing. We normally try to limit it to 10. But I don't know what we're going to do this year. It's, 14 amazing kids, so,
All right, so you usually give a $1,000 scholarship?
yes.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Sarge?
Everybody does it.
Chief Emeritus, thank you. Safety Committee Chair, Ms. Hollifield.
Our last meeting was April 8th, which I talked about at our last council meeting. And so the only thing I have to report is our next safety committee meeting is June 11th at 5:30, where we will be discussing, hopefully, the golf cart ordinances.
All right, thanks. Finance Committee Chair, Ms. Shepherd.
We met, was it last night? Night before? Tuesday evening. We discussed at length the financial reports with Mr. Gilpin, and one other thing that we did discuss in that meeting was the money that we need for our portion of the grant for the restriping project
Sidewalks.
and sidewalks. And we would not be doing that project if it were not for the income tax having been placed back on. We just wouldn't have had the cash to do it with, because it would have had to come from the general fund. There's not enough money in the straight funds to do that with. So it's important that we remember that when we're trying to get all these projects done. I think that's all I had. Sorry, I forgot my notes. Our next meeting is June the 5th in council meeting, or in council chambers at 5:30.
All right, thanks. Next up is Parks and Village Property Chair, Mr. Coogan.
Last meeting was on the 8th of April. We had no meeting this month. Our next meeting will be on the 11th of June, where we will discuss the park event that will be coming up, which I've made some headway on, and I will discuss a little bit later.
Okay.
6:30? 6:30 PM?
Yes,
All right, thanks. Is that all?
that's it.
All right, Burke Trust Chair, Ms. Ross.
We have not had a meeting since the last council meeting. However, we will meet on Monday evening for the scholarship interviews
And
at
I
45.
Yes.
think you said there were 15.
We have 15 applicants. I've talked to all of the applicants now, so everybody's scheduled. Just remember that each council member will have one question. You're asked the same question to every student.
And then you score them. I think you guys were here last year, right?
Well, this is the first time for the new council members, so I'll have score sheets ready for everybody, and, yeah. We have one student who is working that evening, so he's going to just come on his break. I told him we'd fit him in, as the night progressed, so.
All right, that starts at 5:45.
5:45. The first student is interviewing at 6 PM, and the last student is at 8:20 PM.
Okay, that's ambitious. All right, so have a question ready. Have a question ready. Next up is Personnel Committee Chair, Ms. Brown.
We met on May 7th to discuss the Travis contract. That was a continuation of a discussion. It has not been voted. It's still in discussion mode. One of the things Travis did is he asked for a 3-year no raise. However, it was brought up that it was kind of objectionable to not even consider giving somebody a raise who has worked hard and who has not gotten a raise on pay for 5 years. We found out that the OPERS was less than a 2% raise, and he will actually pay taxes on retirement benefits after that, so that's not necessarily what you could consider a raise. We've decided to go ahead and proceed the discussion on to finance for a possibility of a 5-year contract with a raise at the same level that everybody else has gotten for the past few years, which is just 2.9%. And then the discussion will just continue from there. And I did not set up another meeting, but we do need to have a meeting sometime after the next finance one. I failed to do that. Sorry, I'm new to leading a meeting.
Can we have it after finance?
Is that possible for
It's
everybody?
set for June 5th.
Yeah,
Is
I
it?
thought we talked about
Oh,
that.
we said it?
It's at 6:30.
Unless we need one sooner.
June 5th
Okay.
at 6:30.
No, I don't
June,
think so.
okay, that works.
Is that all?
6:30, June 5th. Maybe I did set one and just didn't realize
I
it.
think we did after the, yeah.
Okay.
You're that good and you didn't even realize it.
Right, I was just on top of things.
Anything else?
That's all that I had for that.
All right, next up is our Communication Commission Chair, Mr. Noble.
Thank you. We met on April 24th, and we had a full house, right? Everyone was there? So it was, I thought it was a very, kind of a good initial second meeting, getting things rolling. We've starting to get our bearings and our goals set on what we're, have the commission established for, and that's, to how to engage the community, younger generations, how to deal with the social media aspect of life now. That's a lot different than in the past. Newspapers not doing it for us. And then also to kind of jumpstart everybody back to pay attention to their mission, vision, and values of their entity. Make sure that we're, all the people that are involved on the boards have the same view and the same outlook on what our goals are, so I think it went pretty well. We did skip this month since it was busy, so we've got our next meeting set at June 20th at 7 p.m. and we'll continue to move forward with it.
All right, thanks, Mr. Noble.
Thank you.
Call members, and we'll start with you, Ms. Halton.
I really don't have anything this evening.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Ross?
The only thing I can say next week is Police Week, National Police Week, so take the time out and thank your police officers for the great job that they do. That's all I have.
All right, thanks. Mr. Noble?
There's a lot of stuff going on this summer. We're busy. We're trying to work on development ideas. We're trying to get the communication commission going good, and we're trying to stop drama by ending conflict. That's kind of the way I'm kind of thinking. I think that all of us has kind of gotten to the point to where we've all drilled everything down to the facts level, and we're working off the facts and seeing how that translates into the future to make sure that we're not going down a road that we don't want to end up in. But I think that there's a lot of positive things going on right now, and I want to keep that positivity going. And I want to thank everybody for being open about it. So that's pretty much what I got.
All right, thanks, Mr. Noble. Ms. Brown?
I'm going to make it quick because other people have things to do, but I did want to address the fact that people were very concerned about the talks with Travis. One post was just merely to get people involved, and I do want to just explain that the committee meetings really don't have the public input, so if you'd like to do public input, our council meetings or our community outreach committee does have public input, or you can attend the town halls. The one question that was out there was posed on Mr. Schuler's Citizens of the Village Bethel page, and I would like to address it as best I could because some of it appears to be rhetorical or just not enough detail to actually answer. The controversy began with the underhanded way he went from mayor to administrator with no other candidates considered. Many have complained of ill treatment ever since and was a major factor in the income tax repeals. How do you trust someone who finds it necessary to exhibit such ill will? And first I want to say, the reason Travis has a contract is because of this very post. And it made it very hard. I did take on this role thinking that we could discuss it as not needed because I wanted to trust that we were all adult enough to not have to say this really is a contract role. But this post right here actually kind of ensures and kind of gives the foundation for why it's needed, because it kind of alludes to the fact if you give Travis a contract, we're going to take your cops, the funding for your police. It also alludes to the fact that things aren't handled in a transparent way. One of the things that I learned in our personnel committee meetings was Travis did not appoint himself. He was actually appointed by a majority vote of the council that was serving at the time.
Unanimous vote.
One of the other things that I learned is that it was a little quick, but that was because we were in financial emergency based off of the person who was elected to the job or had been hired, maybe, was probably the best candidate. So we didn't have any candidates that you could pull quickly, would be my take on that. But it really hinders the ability to argue your point for you when you kind of argue the other side's point of view by posting things like that. The other thing that I learned is Travis does some other duties that are not typical village administrator duties. And I looked out on Indeed for any village administrator postings, and I checked the duties, and I got an average of the one major thing that I seen stick out, which was IT work, just to see what an average IT cost would be. And it is $51,926 average in Ohio. And I know the biggest contention has always been Travis's salary. If we got rid of Travis and hired somebody else, and we had to hire somebody at pretty much a similar rate, because looking at it, the average is pretty much where he's at, or actually above where he's at. Then you had to hire somebody to do IT work. Now granted, it might not be a full-time position, so that might be flexible. You're probably looking at more cost. I did ask if people are willing to have that additional cost, and I didn't see it. I will say that I've asked Travis some very tough questions. He's talked about his own career, and he's done so without spitting at me. And I will say that that's probably better than I will have been able to do. But there was one post on that page where people kind of were doing that back and forth before, and it had settled down, it had gotten a lot better. And one woman actually posted, as we sit next to them in the pews at church. And I thought, wow, I'm not a preacher, but there's probably a very good sermon there for us all. So that is what I have on that. It is continued talk, it is a process, it is not set in stone. There are things that take time, like the East Street house, that takes time. It's not like we have money to just buy a house and demo it. I would be willing to entertain finding out if there's any demolition companies around that would give us a free estimate in case we are able to acquire it through the auction process. The other thing I wanted to say was a big thank you to Jennifer Daugherty for helping us secure the bands for the park event. That we do have a Freedom Bookkeeper, which I didn't know, because sometimes people reach out to me for businesses, and I did not know, but there is a Freedom Bookkeeper. The Taylor event is coming up the 25th for his benefit, and what else did I have? I think I had something else. Oh, the Dairy Bar is now open, and Yesteryears is a fairly new store over on South Union at the Old Gullet Sanitation. And that's all that I have tonight.
All right, thanks, Ms. Brown. Mr. Coon?
I'm happy finally to say that we have a representative over at the American Legion that can assist us in our park project, and that's Mr. Dion Pangow, who, by the way, I've requested to attend our safety meeting and our Parks and Properties meeting, mainly on the aspect that he's going to be involved with the function going on August 17th. We still need to ascertain our boundaries on where we're going to hold our liquor, and where the responsible areas are, and so on and so forth. Still have to hash out the bathroom issues, stuff like that. I've nailed down 3 bands through the help of Jennifer Daugherty, who is also the niece of Howard.
I won't hold that against her.
She's a very good person. The names of the 3 bands that I have right now are all 3 rock bands. Life After, Sever the Ties, and Dave Scale Acoustic. There may be a possible 4th one. She'll let me know here soon. Anyways, I'm going to try to get her to the meeting, but she works 3rd shift, so it's hard for her to go to meetings. So anyways, that's pretty much it. I collected a bunch of rocks from her, and I disseminated them in 3 different countries with pictures of me, so I will get those out on Facebook here shortly, for those who haven't seen them. So, okay, that's it.
All right. Have we received the banners yet?
I have not.
We need to,
We received the application for the banners, but we haven't received
I
them.
mean, the old banners to put up.
You're talking about the military banners?
Military
The
banners.
existing
Okay, I'll
ones.
talk to.
Can you talk to Dion for us?
Dion about that? Yeah.
Because we'd like to have those up in the coming week here
Oh,
or
yeah.
so.
Okay.
If it ever
Thanks.
stops raining.
Brian, August 17th is the concert, correct?
Yes. I'm trying to push a 6-hour window on that. At very worst 4, so.
Okay.
Kicking off at noon to possibly 6 in the evening.
Yeah, good idea. All right. Thanks, Mr. Coogan. Ms. Shepherd?
Okay, I want to ask Travis, has anyone gone onto the website and seen the new, I don't know how new it is, our Bethel page? Mm-hmm. Did you do that?
No, we have a web manager who built that for us.
Okay, it's very nice, I thought, anyway.
Yeah, I think he's been working on that for a couple of years, kind of on the side, but yeah.
But it's nice. And also, I want to say one thing about, and I talked with Stephanie about this earlier in the week. I had 2 seniors this year, and so I did reach out to the parents to make sure that their children applied for the Brooks Scholarship. And I hope that what I was told just isn't true. I was told by one child's mother that they were told not to apply because it's need-based. Just flat out don't apply, it's need-based, you'll never get it. Which I hope that that's just not true. Then I talked with the other mother of the second child, and they were given a list of scholarships to apply for, and she just flat out said, I forgot about it, and it wasn't on the list. And I do hope that's not true. But I
Like
don't...
that the Burke Trust Scholarship wasn't on the list?
It wasn't on, I guess, I've never seen a list of what the guidance counselor would give out, or whoever gives it out, for the scholarships. But I do hope that they're not forgetting, maybe, is it $2,000?
This year, we're doing 3 $5,000 scholarships.
3 $5,000 scholarships to be given out over the course of 2 years.
Correct.
So $2,500 and $2,500. If you're going to a school that's $20,000 or $25,000 a year, that may not be a great lot of money, but it goes a very long way towards books and incidentals. One of my grandchildren was a lucky recipient of that. They were jumping up and down because she got that, because they were still, I guess they were renting books at the time, but there were still books that they had to buy. And it's been a long time. I guess I got lucky writing $500 checks to the bookstore at UC for the engineer and the nurse and all the rest of them. They got more expensive as the rest of them went on to college. But I do hope that those stories I hope that there's been a mix-up somewhere, and that no one is intentionally just thinking that the Brooks Scholarship
They should never be told not
worth
to apply for
anything.
any reason. I don't care if the
Yeah,
parents are millionaires. They
I hope that
can
was
apply
just a
for it.
lazy child that made that story up.
It could be. But I would say also that we've had 15 applicants this year, and that's the most we've had in
A long time.
And I would
Yes.
say that the counselor this year has been very helpful. She seemed to be eager in getting it out to the students. The applications themselves do have the breakdown of how the scoring goes. It does have a need portion, and we have students who apply across the financial spectrum every year,
Right.
and it's really a very good scoring mechanism. I think that students who may not have a need financially and who excel in the interview oftentimes will do well.
Well, and here we go again. Need. Someone who's not need-based doesn't get any money. I've been there because we weren't need-based because we made too much money. But I tell you what, when you're putting kids through college, $2,000 or $2,500 is a lot, $1,000 is a lot of money. So I'm hoping that those stories are unfounded.
I would say that this year of the 15, we have a broad spectrum of financial backgrounds for those 15 students, so
All right,
it
anything
wouldn't
else?
appear that they were precluded.
Good. I hope not. I hope it was 2 boys, 2 first cousins that got together and dreamed this up.
Yeah. Anything else,
Since they
Ms.
were
Shepherd?
boys. No,
All
thank
right.
you very much.
Thanks. That brings us to legislation. First ordinance is ordinance 1914, an ordinance authorizing the adoption of an alternative method of apportionment for the undivided local government fund. This is the one I spoke to earlier, and this is what I've been calling the Milford Plan, which would give us a little bit more money than what the township's plan was. So we'd have to waive the 3 on this.
I move we waive the 3 reading rule on, I need a number,
Ordinance 1914.
ordinance 1914. Thank you.
Second.
All right, thank you, Ms. Holifield and Ms. Shepherd. Would you call the roll, please, Mr. Gilpin?
Ms. Holifield,
Yes.
Ms. Ross,
Yes.
Mr. Noble,
Yeah. Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Coogan,
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd.
Yes.
All right, now to adopt ordinance 1914, I entertain a motion.
I move we adopt ordinance 1914.
Do I hear a second?
I second that.
Is there any questions, discussion?
Well, how much more does it give us?
I knew you were going to ask that.
You should have been prepared
I
then.
think it says 9,000 more.
9,500 or something like that.
Because the township,
92.
If you open the attachment,
It's on there.
if you open the attachment and look under the variance column, it's there.
the local government fund distribution plan by the township is going to take us down to just over $26,000. And this one give us 35,
So I believe that's close.
something like that.
All right.
Any other questions?
Is there any, future things that could happen, on the Milford plan that would come back to haunt us or anything? I mean,
Nah, the only thing that,
like, would they, if they lose additional funding from the state or anything like that?
well, the thing is that there's a push to get Governor DeWine to reinstate the full local government fund from prior to 2012. So if that were to happen, I don't know what would happen at that point.
These are adopted on a 3-year basis.
Five. The difference between the township formula and the Milford formula, the township formula was 25% of the pot, everybody got the same amount, the other 75% was based on population. Milford's is 50-50. So that's why smaller entities like ourselves gain, larger entities would lose. The formula is revisited and approved every 5 years.
So even if we got the money, the DeWine gave the state money back, we would still be better off on the Milford plan because it's a 50-50?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think the current budget bill calls for about a 9% increase in the local government fund in year 1 and about a little under 2% the second year.
Okay.
There is a push for full restoration, but I don't know that that's going to get out of committee. I think it's going to be a much smaller number.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Gilpin, call the roll, please.
Ms. Alford?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
All right, well, then it is approved. Ordinance 1915 is an ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the Village of Bethel, State of Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019. These are what you heard Mr. Gilpin speak to earlier, and then we need to waive the 3 on this as well.
I move we waive the 3 on ordinance 1915.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Holifield and Ms. Shepherd. Mr. Gilpin, would you call the roll on waiving the 3, please?
Ms. Holifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
All right, now to adopt ordinance 1915, I entertain a motion.
I move we adopt ordinance 1915.
I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd and Mr. Coogan. Any questions or discussion? Call the roll, please, Mr. Gilpin.
Ms. Holifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to approval of expenses. I trust you've seen those. Any questions, comments? I'd entertain a motion to accept those as read, please.
We have a motion that we accept the expenses as read.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Brown and Mr. Coogan. Call the roll, please, Mr. Gilpin.
Ms. Holifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to payment of bills. I entertain a motion, we pay the bills.
I move we pay the bills.
Everybody wants to pay the bills.
Oh, wait,
I'm going to go with Ms. Holifield because she's usually the one that gets it in there. I'm going to take Mr. Coogan. Thank you. Call the roll, please, Mr. Gilpin.
Ms. Hollifield?
Yes.
Ms. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Noble?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Ms. Shepherd?
Yes.
All right. I entertain a motion that we adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Coogan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
And Ms. Hoffman, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.